Thank you, Nina. Good evening, everyone. I'm Alma Angeles for NET25 World News. On tonight's headlines. 17 Filipino seafarers have safely returned home after being held hostage by Houthi rebels in Yemen for over a year. Southeast Asian cities are making headlines for their severe air pollution. And according to air monitoring organization IQ Air, Ho Chi Minh City ranked as the second most polluted city globally today, with Phnom Penh in fourth place and Bangkok in fifth. Southern California is facing yet another wave of wildfires with at least 8 blazes currently burning. Record high winds from Storm Yoan battered Ireland and Northern Ireland today, leaving 560,000 homes and businesses without power. Meanwhile, in a significant move, Donald Trump's second term seems to be starting on a positive note for China, and so far he hasn't followed through on his threat to impose steep tariffs on the country.
One very big power over China, and that's tariffs. And they don't want them, and I'd rather not have to use it.
NET25 World News starts now. Seventeen Filipino seafarers have safely returned home after being held hostage by Houthi rebels in Yemen for over a year.
Maraming salamat po, Secretary Bautista, Secretaries and Undersecretaries. Hindi po biro yung 428 days, 428 araw. Mas alam po ng ating mga kasamahan sa DFA, sa DMW kung ano po yun. Ang pakay po ng DOH is mula sa kalinga ng pamahalaan sa labas ng bansa na binigay ng ating DFA sa pagsaklolo nila at ng DMW sa paglipad, pagpasok ng DOTR, tuloy po yung utos ng ating Pangulong Ferdinand Marcos Jr. Kami naman po, alagaan natin yung mga kababayan natin ngayong nandito na sila sa lupa ng ating bansa. At ang pag-alaga sa kanila ay hindi lamang doon sa kanilang medical o physical na katawan dahil kanina po may i-validate namin, we heard na some of them are symptomatic for some infections. Not serious, but a lot of things can happen in 428 days. We don't even know if they had access to medical services while they were in captivity. Mangyayari in the next few days, meron po tayong mga psychiatrist mula sa National Center for Mental Health na with the consent of the Seafarers ay nagkakaroon po ng psychological debriefing. It doesn't stop there. Pagkatapos po niyan bilang mga repatriates, sila po ay sagot ng pamahalaan sa anumang pangangailangan na kanilang pagka-ospital.
The crew of the MV Galaxy Leader, seized in November 2023, landed at Ninoy Aquino International Airport Thursday night on a flight from Muscat, Oman. Government officials, including the Department of Migrant Workers and Foreign Affairs, welcomed the seafarers and facilitated their reunion with families. An immediate debriefing was conducted to support their transition home. And this marks the end of a challenging year-long ordeal for the maritime workers and their loved ones.
We just want to confirm that they have arrived safe and sound. Napakabilis na turnover sa atin. Only yesterday in Oman, through the auspices of the Philippine Embassy in Muscat. It was an all-of-government approach. I'd like to thank the DMW and by Secretary Kakdak because they had a very difficult job. Yung patients nila, na they contacted the families for over 1 year. This is 428 days. We have to end the war in Gaza first. So we got it and it was very quick.
Southeast Asian cities are making headlines for their severe air pollution. And according to air monitoring organization IQ Air, Ho Chi Minh City ranked as the second most polluted city globally today, with Phnom Penh in fourth place and Bangkok in fifth. In Bangkok, thick smog blanketed the skyline, leaving outdoor workers struggling to cope. City authorities closed around 300 schools this week due to hazardous air quality.
The air is so bad. When there's a lot of dust, it affects me directly. And since I have a daughter, it greatly impacts her health. Instead of her going out to play, the dust prevents her from doing so. The pollution and everything, other contributing factors, and breathing the air in leads to allergies. It's really not okay for me or the people around me.
ค่ะมันไม่ดีมากจริงๆค่ะ
I'd like the relevant agencies to do more to manage and deal with the dust because it happens every year, it keeps coming back. And it's getting worse each time. They should take more action, not just announce high dust levels and close schools. There needs to be more than that.
In Ho Chi Minh City, IQA reported fine particle matter levels 11 times higher than the World Health Organization's safety threshold. Just weeks earlier, Hanoi was ranked the most polluted city globally, prompting health warnings and recommendations for residents to wear masks and eye protection. Governments across Southeast Asia are pushing for long-term solutions, such as carbon taxes and the promotion of electric vehicles to combat this recurring issue. The battle against air pollution continues as authorities balance short-term measures with sustainable long-term strategies. Southern California is facing yet another wave of wildfires with at least 8 blazes currently burning, and firefighters are making progress on the Hughes Fire, located 45 miles north of Los Angeles, but not before it scorched over 10,000 acres and forced tens of thousands to flee their homes. The youth fire has already consumed over 10,000 acres of North Los Angeles, forcing tens of thousands to evacuate. The Palisades and Eaton fires have been particularly devastating, claiming 28 lives and destroying thousands of homes and businesses.
Our hopes tonight are that we are able to make further progress on the fire. Hopefully the winds will subside, our relative humidity will increase, giving us the upper hand on the fire. Typically, this is when we make the most progress on the fire, allowing us to go into the next operational period ahead of where we started. We're not dealing with a large population and a large amount of residential homes, as we saw with those two fires. Out here, it's more sparsely populated. However, out here, we are dealing with high winds, which we also saw with the other fires, along with thick fuel bed, very receptive fuel bed, and steep topography again.
Firefighters are battling blazes in multiple locations, including a new wildfire near Ventura County Farms and another that threatened the Bel Air community overnight. In Altadena, residents remain traumatized by the recent Eaton fire, where late evacuation warnings contributed to significant loss of life. Meteorological conditions remain critical. Strong winds continue to spread flames, while incoming rain brings the additional risk of potentially deadly mudslides. Red flag warnings are in effect tonight, signaling continued extreme fire danger. Residents are urged to stay informed, follow evacuation orders immediately, and prepare for emergency situations. Emergency services remain on high alert as the wildfire crisis continues to unfold. Record high winds from Storm Yoan battered Ireland and Northern Ireland today, leaving 560,000 homes and businesses without power and forcing the cancellation of hundreds of flights and the closure of schools and public transport. Officials had warned the storm was said to be one of the most dangerous, and they faced and told people to stay indoors. The Irish Weather Agency, Met Éireann, said a gust of 182 kilometers per hour overnight at Mace Head in County Galway provisionally broke an 80-year record. ESB Networks, which provides energy for the whole of Ireland, said unprecedented damage to its network had led to power outages affecting 560,000 homes, farms, and businesses. It expected significant outages as the storm tracks northwards. The power company said ahead of the storm that it could take up to 9 days to restore power for some customers. More than 110 scheduled departures and 110 arrivals at Dublin Airport were cancelled, the airport said, adding that further cancellations and delays were possible. All schools in Ireland and Northern Ireland were closed on Friday, and public transport will not run in Ireland, island while a red wind warning remains in place. The red warning, the highest alert level, was in place for the entire country for the first time since Storm Ophelia in 2017, which killed 3 people. It's due to be lifted for most of Ireland at 1100 GMT and in British-ruled Northern Ireland at 1400. A red warning is also in place for southwestern and central areas of Scotland from 1000 until 1700, or from 10 o'clock until 1700, according to the UK Met Office, warning people to expect flying debris, resulting in danger to life, damage to buildings with roofs blown off, and the closure of roads and bridges. Dozens of flights from airports at Edinburgh and Glasgow were cancelled, and National Rail advised people living across Scotland and parts of northern England not to travel today. And we're turning now to how the Trump presidency, President Trump is proposing significant tariffs on foreign goods, aiming to boost U.S. manufacturing and rebalance trade with countries like China. Now, President Trump and his team are pushing plans to impose double-digit tariffs on foreign goods, which would make imports more expensive and potentially less appealing to American consumers. But critics warn that retaliatory tariffs could backfire, reducing demand for American-made products and ultimately hurting U.S. workers. Speaking virtually to the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, Trump delivered a direct message to world leaders.
But if you don't make your product in America, which is your prerogative, then very simply you will have to pay a tariff, differing amounts, but a tariff which will direct hundreds of billions of dollars and even trillions of dollars into our treasury to strengthen our economy and pay down debt. Under the Trump administration, there will be no better place on earth to create jobs, build factories, or grow a company than right here in the good old USA.
The statement sparked concerns with the head of the World Trade Organization, warning that trade wars could have catastrophic effects, leading to double-digit global GDP losses on par with the economic turmoil of the 1930s.
If we have tit-for-tat retaliation, whether it's 25%, tariff 60%, and we go to where we were in the 1930s, we are going to see double-digit global GDP losses. Double-digit. That's catastrophic. Everyone will pay. Everyone. And the poor countries will pay even more. Second, if we just do not quite tit for tat, but even a version of that, let's say we break into 2 trading blocks and, we're not trading across the world, and we layer in trade policy uncertainty. We've done that work too. We're going to lose 6.4% of real global GDP in the longer term. That's like losing the economy of Japan and Korea combined.
Meanwhile, Trump also addressed efforts to end the war in Ukraine, stating that negotiations are in progress but suggested Moscow must take the next step.
One thing very important, I really would like to be able to meet with President Putin soon and get that war ended. And that's not from the standpoint of economy or anything else. It's from the standpoint of millions of lives are being wasted. I will tell you that President Putin really liked the idea of cutting way back on nuclear. And I think the rest of the world, we would have gotten them to follow. And China would have come along too. China also liked it.
Back home, a federal judge in Washington state temporarily blocked Trump's executive order to end birthright citizenship, calling it blatantly unconstitutional.
This is a nationwide order, essentially directs the United States government to take no further action in implementing the president's unconstitutional order. Well, as we laid out today, so we moved for a temporary restraining order, which has a nationwide impact. The next step will be at a preliminary injunction, which will allow for more thorough briefing. The TRO that was issued today has a 14-day effective date. So for 14 days, the United States government can take no further action implementing or enforcing this order. Well, we will be back in court, as will many other people across the country.
Now, Trump responded, promising to appeal.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mr. President, a U.S. judge temporarily blocks the birthright citizenship order. Do you have any reaction?
No, obviously we'll appeal it. They put it before a certain judge in Seattle, I guess, right? And there's no surprises with that judge.
In other news, President Trump signed an executive order to declassify files related to the assassinations of John F. Kennedy, Robert F. Kennedy, and Martin Luther King Jr. Trump said the move will finally give Americans access to the truth after decades of secrecy. Administration officials have been directed to develop a plan to release the files within 15 days for JFK and 45 days for the other two cases. Russian President Vladimir Putin has made clear he wants to restart nuclear arms cuts talks as soon as possible. The Kremlin said this today in response to comments made by U.S. President Donald Trump. Now, Trump said on Thursday he wanted to work towards cutting nuclear arms, adding that he thought Russia and China might support during their own weapons capabilities. Now, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said the ball was in Washington's court.
Я хочу вам напомнить в этой связи заявление президента Путина, что Россия считает необходимым как можно скорее возобновить разоруженческие переговоры, тем более что существенно подорвана договорно-правовая база в сфере контроля над вооружениями, причем не по вине Российской Федерации. Соединенные Штаты собственно, завершили свое участие и подорвали фактически существование этой договорно-правовой базы. Поэтому есть о чем говорить, нужно говорить. Время во многом упущено, и здесь, собственно, мы и ранее говорили о такой заинтересованности, поэтому тут мяч на стороне американцев, которые прекратили все контакты, все субстантивные контакты с нашей страной.
Meanwhile, in a significant move, Donald Trump's second term seems to be starting on a positive note for China, and so far he hasn't followed through on his threat to impose steep tariffs on the country. Speaking at an economic forum in Davos, he even mentioned that the U.S. and China could have a recovery good relationship, and there's talk he might visit Beijing in the coming months.
He called me, but I see it very good. I think that we're going to have a very good relationship, but we always had a great relationship, I would say, and we look forward to doing very well with China and getting along with China. Hopefully China can help us stop the war with, in particular, Russia-Ukraine. They have a great deal of power over that situation.
In an interview with Fox News, Trump said he would rather not impose tariffs on China, despite campaign promises to hit the country with hefty import duties.
It went fine. It was a good, friendly conversation. I had a great relationship with him prior to COVID. I had a very good relationship with him. I thought it was a very good conversation. We've had other communication before that. They are a very ambitious country. He's a very ambitious man. He's a man that I don't want to be naive and say my friend, but he was like my friend. We had a very good relationship. Now, I put tariffs on China. We took in hundreds of billions of dollars, and Biden was unable to end them because it was so much money you couldn't do it in terms of the budget. He wanted to end them. He did everything he could to end them. He couldn't get it done. But we have one very big power over China, and that's tariffs. And they don't want them, and I'd rather not have to use it. But it's a tremendous power over China. China gets a lot of its money from the United States. They use that money to build the military. Isn't it crazy?
Trump had previously announced that a 10% tariff on all Chinese imports could begin on February 1, with a possibility of levies as high as 60%, a key point in his campaign rhetoric. Meanwhile, Beijing has called for the U.S. and China to resolve their differences through dialogue and consultation, highlighting the importance of diplomatic solutions.
We have stated our position on this issue many times. China-U.S. economic and trade cooperation is mutually beneficial and a win-win situation. We believe that if there are differences and frictions between the two sides, they should be resolved through dialogue and negotiations. There are no winners in trade wars and tariff wars. It's not in the interests of either side, nor good for the world.
Anything is possible with the Trump administration, but at the moment I think it's actually a good thing that they're going after 10%. To kind of set the stage of we are serious, but we also want to work something out. I think if the U.S. does not necessarily get what it needs, you will start to see a ratcheting up of tariffs until it becomes too painful, and then something is done to take those tariffs away. So 10% won't really lead to anything outside, any supply chains moving outside of China, partly because China has already done a lot of de-risking in the last 6-7 years because of the trade war. So Chinese supply chains are actually much more resilient than American supply chains at this point. If it goes above 10%, you will see more companies either shift further into Southeast Asia particularly, or drive an automation and robotics to kind of cut costs as quickly as possible.
In a forceful address to international business and political leaders, President Trump issued direct demands and warnings about global economic policy. He called on OPEC to reduce oil prices and urged world governments to lower interest rates.
America is back and open for business.
U.S. President Donald Trump on Thursday addressed the global leaders at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, promising his second term will forego free market norms inside the U.S. and out.
I'm also going to ask Saudi Arabia and OPEC to bring down the cost of oil. You got to bring it down, which frankly, I'm surprised they didn't do before the election. That didn't show a lot of love.
In his speech, broadcast from Washington, D.C., Trump demanded lower oil prices and that interest rates drop worldwide.
With oil prices going down, I'll demand that interest rates drop immediately, and likewise, they should be dropping all over the world. If the price came down, the Russia-Ukraine war would end immediately. Right now, the price is high enough that that war will continue. You got to bring down the oil price. You got to end that war. They should have done it long ago. They're very responsible, actually, to a certain extent for what's taking place. Millions of lives are being lost.
Trump listed the rapid-fire changes he had made since his swearing in that had upended U.S. government policies on diversity, climate change, and immigration. Some attendees, including Secretary General of Amnesty International Agnes Callamard, were critical of Trump's America First agenda.
He doesn't have a vision for the rest of the world. He has a very strong American vision, and I understand why Americans vote for him. It's a vision of America first, the workers first, the American banks first, the American investments first, etc.
But on a global scale, all of this won't allow stability. It will only reinforce inequalities and insecurity. So the complete lack of vision for the rest of the world is shocking.
If you don't make your product in America, which is your prerogative, then very simply you will have to pay a tariff.
I think the first play for Trump is, I think there's it's undeniable that the United States shoulders much of the expense of everything in the world. I think Trump has kind of campaigned on that. I think he goes back to that, whether it be NATO, Ukraine, etc. I think this is just more of a, let's get people to the table to talk about how unfair all the rest of the world's problems are in the United States and our economy. So I don't necessarily know if we go through that at this point. I mean, Europe's in worse shape than we are. So I think economically, tariffs are going to not help them for certain. But I'm not sure if we get those. Obviously, tariffs, there's some trade-offs with currencies, but I think this is really more of an opening move to get people back to the table to talk about, let's look at dividing some of these expenses more fairly.
Some of Trump's harshest criticism was reserved for traditional U.S. allies, Canada and the European Union, who he threatened again with new tariffs, while berating them for allowing trade surpluses with the United States.
President Trump said that he wants to usher in a golden age for the United States. That will require more steel and aluminum, more critical minerals, more reliable and affordable energy, more of everything to run the U.S. economy full steam ahead. Canada has all those resources, and we stand at the ready to work with the United States to create a booming and secure North American economy. The alternative for them would be more resources from Russia, China, or Venezuela. Canada is a safe, secure, and reliable partner in an uncertain world.
But one thing we're going to be demanding is we're going to be demanding respect from other nations. Canada, we have a tremendous deficit with Canada. We're not going to have that anymore. We can't do it. I don't know if it's good for them. As you probably know, I say you can always become a state And if you're a state, we won't have a deficit. We won't have to tariff you, et cetera, et cetera. But Canada has been very tough to deal with over the years. And it's not fair that we should have a $200 billion or $250 billion deficit. We don't need them to make our cars, and they make a lot of them. We don't need their lumber because we have our own forests, et cetera, et cetera. We don't need their oil and gas. We have more than anybody.
Yes, I think part of that with those two neighbors, I think it's got more to do with immigration. It's hey, you guys need to help us out a little bit. Immigration at the U.S. border starts at Canada and starts at Mexico to make sure it doesn't get there. And I think that's basically what the idea is. We certainly don't want to have tariffs, but let's sit down at the table and talk about what you're going to do to stop the immigration flow. We're trying to take care of our borders, but if you don't do anything on your end, it's not going to really help us that much. I think that's really the case in point. Is I think he's using these tariffs as a way to get people back to the table to deal with some things that he thinks are unfair. Whether we get tariffs or not from Canada, Mexico, I certainly don't think we're going to get 25%. Maybe there's a little bit, but I think it's more of a matter of getting them to the table to talk about how they can help us stop the flow of illegal immigration into the United States.
Since taking office, Trump has withdrawn the United States from the World Health Organization and the Paris Climate Agreement.
And the news continues here on NET25. We'll be right back. Travelers clutching large suitcases and gifts throng Shanghai Hongqiao Railway Station today, with many bubbling with excitement as they join millions of Chinese returning to their hometowns to celebrate the Lunar New Year with family amid a sluggish economy.
Yes, I do have some concerns, because every year the impact from the economic environment is that it's harder and harder to earn money. In terms of the impact on my work, it's okay. I'm worried, but our boss, our air conditioning industry, is still okay. There are some impacts, but they're not that big. No, I'm very happy that I'm going home. Super happy and excited.
Hundreds of millions of Chinese crisscross the country during the Lunar New Year holidays each year to reunite with families back in their hometowns or for sightseeing during an extended period, making it the world's largest annual human migration. China's Transport Ministry estimates a total of 9 billion trips will be made across the country during the 40-day travel period around the festival, up from 8.4 billion trips recorded during the same period last year. Now, this year's Lunar New Year travel rush kicked off on Tuesday and will last for 40 days, concluding on February 22. The official Spring Festival holidays, as the New Year celebrations are known in China, will run from January 28 to February 4. Meta has showcased its new Orion augmented reality glasses on the sidelines of the World Economic Forum in Davos. Now, those at the annual meeting in the Swiss ski resort who were curious of the new glasses could attend demonstrations of a prototype of the high-tech glasses, which use holographic projection to allow users to see graphics projected through transparent lenses into their field of view. Meta chief Mark Zuckerberg has called the glasses the most advanced glasses the world has ever seen. He also said they offer a glimpse of the future in which smart glasses will replace smartphones as the main mode of communication. Throughout the annual business elite meeting, Meta has had a pavilion on the main promenade showcasing various kinds of tech wearables.
What we've done with input with these glasses, part of it is eye tracking. So the eye tracking gaze acts as a cursor, like a mouse cursor. And then the second thing is clicking. And so we have a neural interface band, which I'm wearing, that reads the signals from your brain to your muscles and predicts which movement you're doing, which allows you to do discrete clicks without having to hold your hands up in front of you when you're out and about, as well as do other gestures to control the UI.
In what order?
Now, when we talk about augmented reality, we mean that you're looking at the physical world, and we're overlaying digital content on top of it. It allows for things like having a virtual TV on the wall, walking down the street and having arrows overlaid on the street where you're supposed to make a turn instead of having to look at a screen, virtual picture frames, virtual art, and much more.
And with that, we end tonight's broadcast. For everyone here on NET25. I'm Alma Angeles. Thank you for joining us. Good night.